Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are here for another archetype discussion. This will be, what are we on now, AP? Part 10? Is that what this is? I think so. Part 10, I believe. We're running out of fingers fast here, so it's going to be hard for us to count beyond this, folks. But we'll probably keep going because we do enjoy these discussions on archetypes. And first of all, let me welcome my good friend here, AP. Welcome. It is so great to see you.
Thank you once again for hosting me on your channel. These discussions are a lot of fun, and I think we have a juicy classic
Yeah.
straight out of everyone is going to have so many different examples of this and so many different ways that it's been done. Because what are we talking about today, Philip?
Oh, it is the Dark Lord. So yeah, this is the a pretty familiar one, I would say, to most folks who are fantasy fans, whether we're talking all the way from Harry Potter to Star Wars to Lord of the Rings to Wheel of Time. There's just so many examples of this particular figure looming in the background for most of the story, as the biggest baddie out there. Usually the heroes are engaged fighting the lieutenants and the lesser evil beings before we get to the big baddie at the end. And this figure is very scary and looming and very menacing. But this goes way back, doesn't it? Because you can go all the way back to Zoroastrianism, I suppose, to see this example of it is a sort of a worldview that sees things as kind of a good and evil. It tends to go hand in hand with that type of worldview, doesn't it? Going way back to Zoroastrianism and its influence on Judeo-Christianity and that sort of thing. Goes way back, doesn't it?
Yeah, and when we think of the Dark Lord, so many different examples of it, but it is usually set up as the Dark Lord is the epitome of evil power,
Right.
and set up against it will be the chosen one hero or the quest group or the small, scrappy, underfunded, underpowered, barely paid forces of good who can't get the staff and they have Tim the intern as their backup.
Yeah.
Whereas the Dark Lord has access to all of the resources in the world, all of the powers in the world, and it sets up that underdog conflict. It sets up good versus evil. It ties into, I mean, that quite cynical worldview that we have, that when we look out in the world, we can see all of this evil and how can any one person make a difference? And
Yeah.
at the core of so many of these stories
Mm,
is one person can make a difference.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
the Dark Lord is doing a lot of different things. And we've seen transitions and movements with the Dark Lord, which obviously we'll get to. But why don't we start out with a couple of the big classic examples that we can talk about?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the scrappy underdog versus, and then Lord of the Rings is, I think, probably a good starting point for this because you have not one but two Dark Lords here. If you go back to the Silmarillion and the old stuff, you've got Melkor, who becomes Morgoth, who is a Satan figure essentially, and Satan is kind of, I guess, where a lot of this derives from. I guess, right? And this supernatural evil force that is just bad and evil because, well, he is. So, and if we're
And at
talking,
least in a lot of Anglophone and in the Western tradition,
absolutely, yeah,
Satan is the go-to for I need the ultimate evil. Who's the ultimate evil? It's the guy that invented robo dialing. Um,
right.
must have been the devil. Spam emails. Again, I'm
Yeah,
convinced it was the devil.
yeah,
But
probably, yeah,
but even with the devil as an archetype, this uh, creature or embodiment of evil, in literature we've seen different versions of it,
yeah,
contrasting, say, Dante's version of the devil in the
right.
Inferno and Milton's version of the devil in Paradise Lost.
Yeah. Where Milton's Satan has a fairly complex psychology, has reasons for his rebellion against God, and has moments of hesitation, has moments of regret about the destruction that he causes. but ultimately commits to the cause of destruction in his rebellion against God. But we see Milton Satan being, weeping at the idea of destroying Adam and Eve, these beautiful creatures, and weeping at his followers, right, in that iconic opening scene when he looks around and his followers are all in the pit of hell and there are flames all over them, and he weeps at what he's caused. So it's a much more complex portrayal of Satan in Milton as opposed to Dante. Yeah.
But at the heart of it, 'tis better to rule in hell than serve in heaven.
Yeah.
Like, there's still arrogance, there's still hubris, there's all of those elements. A lot of it goes, and again, it's the seven vices. We find a lot of that construction within Dark Lords.
Yeah.
But yes, let's face it, you can't beat about the bush on this one. Lucifer, Morningstar, the devil, Satan, that is the big archetype. And, even the play on names, like, has anyone heard of Shaitan?
Yeah. Wheel of Time is not that creative a play on names, actually, but there it is. So, but archetypally speaking, it is interesting, the psychological function that this figure performs for us, because I do think we go through life often feeling like an underdog, like there are big forces out there that we're up against, that essentially, whether it's just life or the world or that vast darkness that's going to win in the end, we feel like underdogs and that we have to struggle and fight to get anywhere. So I think it's easy to identify with a hero who has to go up against something vast and big and supernatural. And that is the function of this figure, I believe, in literature and in psychologically speaking, what that figure delivers to us as we're caught in the story.
Yeah, because think about it, even if we're not talking about fantasy, think of all of the sports films. And it's the scrappy underdog who wins against all the odds.
Right.
We love those types of stories. And what's more of an underdog? Good winning out over evil.
Yeah.
That's because we look at the state of the world and we go, if you think good's gonna, I'm a not even a cup half full. Someone stole my cup. There's just a small puddle on the desk.
Oh no.
We can get drawn into that cynicism, and there's a hope and an optimism to those sorts of stories.
Yeah, I
and
got my
it's
cup.
one of the reasons why we like them.
That's my cup. It's more than half full right now, but I keep sipping at it. So anyway, we were talking about Morgoth, and Morgoth Silmarillion is the big baddie, is this huge, and the humans ultimately, and the elves as well. Spoiler for Silmarillion, everyone, but it's a terrible struggle, and a lot of people die, a lot of elves die, and they really are outgunned by this big...
And that's just when they tried to read the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
Bodies everywhere.
Carnage. So ultimately, though, Morgoth has this lieutenant named Sauron, who eventually becomes the big baddie and becomes, as most people know Sauron was originally had a body, but most people know the disembodied eye that you have in Lord of the Rings, which is, I think it's an interesting progression from that Sauron, who is more or less anthropomorphic, to Sauron the eye, because that allowed that abstraction, I think, allows you to feel that this is a bigger, more powerful force than a normal person could deal with, right?
Yeah, because Sauron was no body to mess with. But what was interesting about that is that, yes, it caused that abstraction, because obviously one of the strange things with a lot of fantasy is the idea that it'll come down to a fight, and you can't really fight a big floaty eye that's on fire. Like, what are you going to fight him with? A fire extinguisher? Throw buckets of water? A chain link of all of these people with buckets of water throwing them at Sauron's eye.
Yeah.
Because, and again, like, Tolkien was going for something more than just someone to fight. And I have to admit, it is one of the aspects of the films that I didn't enjoy, which was
Hmm.
that analeptic scene where we see Sauron walking out and hitting people with a big mace.
Right,
And
right, right.
for me, that greatly reduced the sinister nature of Sauron,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
permeating evil that was seeping into men's souls. And
yeah.
the idea that, oh, well, yeah, he just was a big bloke with a big stick
Huh,
was kind of reductive. And I didn't enjoy that. But
huh. Interesting.
that's beside the point. But you can see the attraction of setting up a nebulous force, because how do you fight that? And it ties back into that notion of, what can you do? How can good as a force win out over evil?
Yeah, yeah.
So it creates interest and intrigue.
Speaking of permeating forces of evil, I think what you have in Wheel of Time with Shaitan, and this is an entity that acts through, like many big dark lords, act through lieutenants. So Sauron has the Nazgul, and Shaitan has the, what are they
The
called?
Nazgul. Oh, sorry, no, they're not the Nazgul. Sorry, the
A,
Forsaken. They're
AP,
completely different.
AP.
No, to be fair, the Forsaken are actually very different to the Nazgul.
Yeah, yeah.
Was it the Mervil on the other hand, or they're very similar to the Nazgul. But
Yes, I think they are more or less. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, they what were the orcs? The Trollocs.
Trollocs. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
you can see the let's call it inspiration. You can see the inspiration
Yes,
that Jordan took,
good word.
but why? The entirety of the Wheel of Time is building up to that conflict, but most of the tension of these books is
Hmm.
in facing off against the lieutenants, the
Yeah.
tangible foes
Hmm.
that the hero can actually spar with, can fight with. And that's because when we think of these confrontations, there typically is one of three ways that it plays out. Either the hero is embiggened and basically uh, granted the power and stature to face off against this supernatural, all-powerful evil, that the hero is elevated to that position so they can fight as equals, because otherwise there's no tension. Or the evil is descended down and takes possession of someone, so that again we have this leveling of the playing field, and the evil and the hero are roughly the same.
Right.
Or we have another option, which is you forego the idea of conflict, and
Hmm.
it has to do with testing virtues or passing these moral tests. And again, like we see example of that in the Christian Bible and the temptation of Christ,
Sure.
that
Yeah.
these are not new ideas.
Hmm.
But how else do you have a mortal person, a hero, face off against evil, that trying to find ways around it? And of course, like Tolkien famously has the ring just be unmade, and that unmakes Sauron because so much of his essence is tied up into it.
Right. Right.
Because
Right.
you can't have Frodo punching Sauron. You can't have Aragorn trying to poke Sauron in the eye with his sword. It would be silly. So what was Tolkien's other option? Have Sauron descend down into a mortal form again,
Hmm.
and then just have another big fight.
Right.
And it lacks that poetic and symbolic act
Yeah.
that we had at the end, which tying in with Gollum and also Sam and that whole journey, very, very important.
Yeah, interesting. So one Dark Lord that takes eventually a more tangible form is Darth Sidious in the Star Wars movies, the original trilogy. Emperor Palpatine, or Darth Sidious, right? So he, spoiler for Star Wars. So so he initially is a very shrouded figure. He has that hood and everything, and he's in the background. Darth Vader is the one that is the lieutenant who is enacting his will, and he is a little more nebulous, and he has that permeating influence in a sense through the force. Like he can talk to people from afar and that sort of thing, and he has a vast power. But eventually he takes a more human form by Return of the Jedi. We see, it looks like he's neglected to put on his anti-wrinkle cream there for a while, but more or less anthropomorphic there at the end, isn't he? And so you get a little bit of both, I think, maybe in the original Star Wars trilogy.
And you can see what I meant by the idea of the empire, the idea of the emperor. That was this pervasive force, and then at the end, it's a wee wizened old man, and it's far less impactful. And what's it reduced down to? It's a fight, and while it's climactic and while it's good, they've reduced the scale of evil in this into something that's manageable for essentially a fist fight. And that's one way of doing it. And I think you can see why the idea of having heroes go up against these great nebulous dark lords, they moved away from using gods. In David Eddings' Belgariad, they go up against Torak, Kal Torak, king and god Torak. And we face that difficulty. How does the hero face off against a god? And to be perfectly honest, it's actually quite a disappointing ending. But when we think of more modern fantasy novels, the Darth Vader character in Star Wars, we realize that's actually the antagonist that we want. That's a force of evil that we can comprehend. It is a force of evil that the hero can contend with and can spar with. So the idea of the Forsaken in The Wheel of Time are brilliant because they act as foils. They act trying to trap and fight, and there's different ways that they try to derail the process. They have these different motivations. We see that in Glenn Cook's The Black Company, the threat of the Dominator, as the most all-powerful, all-evil wizard who's practically immortal, and it's the Taken are the lieutenants, and again, very like the Nazgul, very like these sorts of evil personified, and they all have their own little thing that they do or they like, their own characteristic. But as soon as you get it down onto that human scale, it becomes much more of a give and take. There's tension between the protagonist and the antagonists, as opposed to a nebulous Dark Lord that really you don't feel the tension.
You see it happen in Harry Potter, right? In the initial Harry Potter books, Voldemort is a nebulous presence. I mean, more or less in the first several books. And then later, when Voldemort takes a human, and Voldemort has his minions, his lieutenants, what are they called? Death Eaters, right? Yeah, the Death Eaters. But then later, Voldemort has a tangible human form, and it becomes more about Harry versus Voldemort, right?
And when you think of, no matter how good Ralph Fiennes' portrayal of Voldemort was in the film, Voldemort on screen just wasn't as scary, was he? Voldemort, the sinister force, was, he could be anywhere. He could be doing anything. You didn't know. It was the fear of the dark, tapping into that dark, unconscious fear that we have. And then at the end, it's a guy who has a bit of a silly nose and a speech impediment and a dirty robe, and he waves a stick around. And you can see why. No, again, maybe I'm a wee bit too harsh on Harry Potter, but you can see the sort of the point that I was making about that isn't quite as sinister and it isn't quite as frightening, but it does give a tangible opponent for essentially a fist fight, if that's how you want to end it.
Right. Yeah, interesting. Some other examples. One that I think you have read The Broken Empire, or at least part of it. Oh,
yeah, I've read that first trilogy.
The first trilogy. Okay, so you are familiar with The Dead King. What's interesting to me is what you learn, without spoilers here about it, but what you learn about the Dead King also, I think what you have there is that intangible, permeating evil force that it can see everywhere, and you don't know when it's going to grab you, and or when its minions are going to grab you. You get a bit of a spin on that, though, which I can't talk about because I don't want to do spoilers here. But I think it's an interesting spin that Mark Lawrence takes on it in Broken Empire, and he elaborates on that a little bit in the other trilogy in that same world that happens concurrently, the Red Queen's War trilogy as well. So that's kind of cool. That's a good example, I think, of the use of this Dark Lord with a little bit of a more modern spin on it. But there are so many as well. You mentioned before we started recording Donaldson, right?
The Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, and like the very first book, Lord Falls Bane, that we see this projection of a Sauron-like figure. But and again, I think one of the movements we have seen in fantasy is away from a simplistic notion like that. And Donaldson certainly adds a huge amount of psychological, not necessarily real, but metaphor. It's very mature in how it approaches those concepts. And when you take, and I know Tolkien wasn't intending a bald sort of metaphor or a bald symbol of evil. His work is nuanced, but Donaldson gives it a lot more depth, because obviously he's creating an anti-hero.
Right.
And an anti-hero facing off against a villain, and you go, the degrees of separation here, there's a lot that Donaldson is playing with that. And I think that's a fascinating evolution within the genre. Like but when we think of the evil gods in Forgotten Realms or the Dragonlance books, I think it's like Tarkus, the queen, evil queen god of dragony kind of things, and Loth, the spider queen from Forgotten Realms. They are personifications of evil, and because of that, there's difficulty in writing them and making them interesting because they're kind of one note. And you know, that ties back into looking at Milton and how Milton did it, and in effect, in some ways, reduced the evilness of Satan by making him slightly more sympathetic. But that reduces him in that scale. So how you create true evil, we can't wrap our heads around it because we're not built that way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's much more complex. Well, speaking of complexity, our favorite series, the Malazan books, notably lacks a Dark Lord figure, doesn't it? Just as hang
on a second. It does. We won't go into spoilers, really, but
we're going to try hard.
I know, but hang on. Chapter 2 of the very first book, Gardens of the Moon.
Yeah.
How is Anamander Rake introduced?
Right.
He's standing way up high above the battlefield.
Yeah.
He has onyx skin. So like very unnatural black, almost absorbing all light, and a wild mane of hair. And he's described as the Chaos Mane, the Dark Lord of Moonspawn. Yeah. And you go, Erickson, really, wee bit on the nose there. But this is something that Diana Wynne Jones did in The Tough Guide to Fantasyland is kind of the guidebook, and it was the name of that book has just popped out of my head.
Oh, I'll look it up. You keep talking.
But taking that idea of the Dark Lord and then turning it on its head, because it is kind of unrealistic in some ways. The Dark Lord of Darkholme or something, is that?
I'm finding.
I hate it when I forget things, but with
she has a lot of
with the Malazan Book of the Fallen, there is that subversion of the trope, because Rake is presented that way. We see it, and a lot of this. And this is where it comes down to how a lot of these authors play with it. Because there's two different ways. One is you can make your protagonist an anti-hero. Because if they're down in the dirt, you can't have that clear contrast between good and evil. Because your character is not good. They're just less evil than the evil character.
Yeah.
But another way of doing it is thinking about perspective. And that's, going back to Milton again, by giving us the perspective from Satan, by giving us the perspective of these dark characters, of these evil characters, and showing us their point of view, showing us their reasons for doing something. Empathy can be created, understanding can be created, and that complicates the notion of good versus evil as a simplistic binary. And what we end up with is what we all kind of enjoy now, which is this morally gray morass that permeates everything. We want complexity. We want complex characters. We want heroes who have feet of clay. We want villains who have a little bit of shine to them, that they're not just all darkness.
Yeah.
That it plays with that. It gives us a much more complex picture. And that can be far more engaging than, yes, they're the good guy. Yes, they're the bad guy. And now they're going to go and hit each other with swords.
Yeah, so by the way, Diana Wynne Jones's parody is indeed the Dark Lord of Dirkholm. Yeah. So yeah, you were right. So yeah, I mean, once you have a period when you have a Dark Lord of Dirkholm, is it possible even to go back to something? I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting question. Of course, you do have Wheel of Time, which was still being written into the 2000s. Was finished in the 2000 teens, even, I think, right? So this concept, it's not completely gone, is it? It still has an appeal, I think.
And Sanderson's Cosmere has a dark god.
Yeah.
Sanderson's Mistborn, even it starts out with Lord Ruler in the Final
Lord
Empire.
Ruler. Yeah.
There are aspects of this, and you can see the scaling of it can be very, very interesting. But it's when you have the perennially understaffed forces of good against an all-powerful evil, it can become parody so very quickly.
Yeah.
But you were saying, like, can we still have it today? Of course we can, because the more people who go in for morally gray, everything is morally gray, then someone doing good versus evil is going to seem not necessarily fresh, but slightly different and slightly new. So that is a breath of air into it. So then more people do that, and then it's, oh, no. And you have this movement backwards and forwards as we move between things that become popular and then they become established, and then we want something different from that. So it's all development over time.
So never count out the Dark Lord then.
Well, they're usually back for a sequel.
You got to have the sequel. All right. Well, any other thoughts on this archetype, which is obviously an important one that has some psychological resonance and probably will continue to do so. Tricky one, I think, to handle well in our gritty gray days, but nevertheless, I think you're probably right that these things do go in cycles. So despair not, those authors out there who wish to have a Dark Lord in your series. So any other thoughts, AP?
Well, I just say there are ways to do it well, and it's always about imagining how you're going to do the final conflict.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to set them up against each other, if you have the idea in your head how you're going to do that,
right,
and there you go, that's all you need. But to sell it, that is usually the stumbling point for a lot of the conclusions of these series, is how it ends up.
That grand confrontation at the end, right? Yeah.
But thank you very much, Philip. I had a lot of fun on this one.
No grand confrontations here. We just had a good time talking. So thank you, AP. This was a lot of fun as always. And thank you all for listening. And as always, please do leave your examples in the comments. All right, then, everyone. Bye-bye.